right, hello everyone. Dr. Joel Rosen and Dr. John Thomas here today talking to you about the importance of mycotoxin testing. And we're really excited to talk to you about this is because we find this is a huge anchor or a huge variable that may be dragging you down that you don't even realize. So why don't we just talk about what you're seeing in practice, John? I'll talk about what I'm seeing and why it's so important to do this.
Yeah, so mycotoxins, and if people don't know what mycotoxins are, we're talking about mold. And so mycotoxins are metabolite that if you're exposed to mold, the mold itself is going to create a metabolite, and you can actually test mycotoxins on yourself to determine if you have a previous or an ongoing mold exposure that's there. And one of the hardest things with mold, I think, is people don't associate that mold toxicity or mold exposure can be a big trigger for their chronic health issues. And because the problem is if they're the only one that's sick in the house and nobody else is, they're the only one that's sick in their work environment, nobody else is, they don't make the connection that it could be something in home or something at work that's causing that. And realize everybody's toxic load and genetic predisposition is different. And so what I'm seeing in practice is if I've got somebody that's got, some type of chronic health issues or an autoimmune disease process, we know that there's some type of trigger and effect, and we've kind of exhausted options. More often than not, mold is a big factor, and it's becoming the point where probably over the last year and a half, I've kind of had a little bit of a change in terms of approach where, I'm asking more questions to my patients about mold exposure, previous mold components, have they have visual water damage or previous water damage aspects, they lived somewhere previously. And then even if the answer is no to a lot of those, I'm still checking mycotoxins on them. And more often, I'd say probably over 50%, they come back at very elevated, and it's a big piece of the puzzle. And so there's that big disconnect because nobody else in the house is really sick. And so they don't kind of go down that rabbit hole initially. So, that's what I'm seeing in my practice is I'm looking at mold more and more because some really, really good mycotoxin tests that are available now. And I'm seeing that as a big epigenetic stressor, a big kind of toxic stressor to their body that's causing, any type of neurological issue or energy or, mood imbalances. The list can go on and on what mold can do to the body.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a look, right? I mean, if you're dealing with a chronic health issue and it's not on your radar, it's on our radar as the doctor, even if we are a bit skeptical of you not thinking it's there. A couple things you mentioned too, John, because I just talked to someone earlier today and they did a mold test in their home, but they didn't do a mold test on them. Right. And that's a huge difference because they may assume, okay, I'm not in that home anymore, but the mold is still in you. So it's really important for that reason. And then the other thing I would say too is that a lot of the time you will see some sickness run in families too. So I always think about the environmental component where you're mentioning maybe one person in the home is sick and everyone isn't, and it's not on their radar. But especially if more, the people in the home are sick, then you got to think about that environmental load, which brings us to just another point is that the reason why the mold is so important is because it directly impacts the mast cells. It directly impacts the HPA axis from the mast cells. And there may be some major challenges in the downstream mechanics to deal with that. Are you finding once you get those results, it's a game changer as to what you can do to help those people?
Yeah. And a couple things you said, if there is a kind of a family health issue where a lot of people in the house have symptoms, they may be very similar symptoms and maybe different symptoms. If a lot of people in the house have health challenges, mold is on the table without a doubt. You got to investigate that. You're doing yourself an injustice. You're going to be chasing your tail, going from doctor to doctor until you determine that your environment, the air you breathe in every single day, is adding more of a toxic load and affecting your body and the symptoms you're experiencing. But when you're talking about kind of why maybe one person gets affected and others don't, well, it ties into some genetic factors. And you mentioned mast cell components. We know that mycotoxins will stimulate mast cells, release and dump more histamine, which then drives more inflammation process. And somebody comes into this thinking I've got mast cell activation, I've got histamine intolerance issues, I've got methylation impairment, whatever it may be. But the thing is, if you got this exposure to mold currently, or this past exposure to mold, where those mold spores are still in your body producing those mycotoxins, then what happens is you are stimulating certain pathways or just driving inflammation, and you're kind of, spinning your head trying to figure out what the cause is. We also know genetically that there's certain, and this is the medical research, and this is something I've been studying for a little while, is we know people that kind of fall into our weakened immune genetic type that have weakness in like GPX enzymes, which is glutathione peroxidase, or KEAP1 genes or NRF2 genes. All right, there's a lot of research on those 3 genes in particular that affect that mycotoxins affect. So if you're talking about maybe one person in the family is hit harder than the other, maybe that person's got more genetic burden on them or genetic weakness on those 3 stories than the other person, plus all the other things in our life that add to that toxic burden, where that mycotoxins, like that straw that, the molds, the straw that broke the camel's back. But there is a genetic component why maybe some people get hit harder with mold exposure versus others' tolerance is a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. And we've heard too where they can have co-infections, but then they go into the home and it's moldy and it's just the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. And they're doing all these viral protocols, Lyme protocols, no gluten, and that's a big elephant in the room that's not being addressed. So why don't we just explain to the people what we're offering on our site, what test we do, and how they can go about getting it.
Yeah, so there's ways to check mold, and you mentioned about doing a mold test at home, and that is important because you've got to differentiate where the exposure is coming from. But the thing is there's good and bad ways to check mold in your environment. Some people just go to a local hardware store and get like those petri dishes for $10-20 and say, hey, nothing grew, or they send it into the lab and they said it's within the normal limits. Some people go the extra step and maybe have somebody come in and do an air quality test on their home, which there's good and bad with that. And a lot of it is based on the interpretation of the person doing it, not understanding the other toxic burdens that you have, like viral issues or Lyme or metals or whatever it may be, and your genetic predisposition, why maybe just under the guidelines for a mold aspect in the home may hit you harder than the next person based on those factors. But you want to test your mold burden, all right? And so there's a couple labs that are out there that test mycotoxins. Okay. And we have those available on our Your Genetic Type store, where you can go on there and purchase those mycotoxin tests. We have mycotoxin tests from a lab called Great Plains, and they test some of these metabolites of these mycotoxins that if those are elevated based on your urine output, it indicates that there's that mold buildup in your body that is either there due to previous exposure or due to ongoing exposure. And then you got to kind of put your detective hat on and differentiate, is this something that you're still in that environment, or if this is all past component, but the best part about that is doing a test like that, that this is a rabbit hole you got to go down. That this is a big stressor on your biochemistry that's causing you to feel the way that you're feeling. So on our site, we have the Great Plains mycotoxin test. And I think we have a Vibrant one on our website as well, don't we?
Yeah, I think it's there.
So those two are the mycotoxins I recommend the most. And those are available for you that if you have chronic issues and you're still, chasing your tail trying to figure out like, okay, what is causing this? And maybe you're the only one in the house that's affected, or maybe there's other people in your home that have other health challenges. You want to investigate how mold is a factor in this. And so I strongly would encourage you to, this is something that you can just go on our website, you can order the test, and within less than 3 weeks, you're going to have a objective measurement to determine if mold is a piece of this puzzle.
Yeah, especially if this is a chronic illness, you're at your wit's end, you're not figuring out, deep down there's something missing, you haven't done the mold test, you don't necessarily think it's a problem, or you kind of do think it's a problem. We always say if you're the canary in the coal mine, or you're the person that kind of smells mold and you got a good sniffer and that you're in a place that's moldy, then that's a good sign itself. And the good news about that is that we have protocols in this site as well, and other tests to help you hone in on what genetic type you are. And now that we know that this is the epigenetic factor that we're dealing with, or one of the ones, we can help you construct a game plan going forward. So go ahead and click on the link that you see wherever you're watching this video, and that will allow you to purchase your mycotoxin test. We'll send you a report, and then you'll know what to do going forward.